So, we're on chapter 22. Is there any questions on what I just said? Don't be scared to receive communion either. Okay. Okay, chapter 22. Eliphaz. We're coming to the end here. Yes. I can't actually remember what the heck I talked about last time. Did you ever send me? You didn't, right? No, okay. I gotta look at my thing. Yes. Okay. So just to recall where we're at on this, I'm going to go all the way up to the beginning here to show you. Because we can't lose sight of where we've been and where we're going to. This is where we're at. We did the first cycle, which started with when Job opens his mouth, that's his big song of darkness, or he wants the perpetual darkness. Then we had the second cycle. So it went through all three friends, and it went through the three friends again. And now I did Job's first entrance into the third cycle, and we're going to have Eliphaz, Job, Bildad, and then Job again. And there's no Zophar, okay? The third cycle is really short, and it's missing a guy. A guy gets silenced, it seems. Also, we're going to find some complicated things coming up. And our translations are going to really start to diverge. Good doctor, your translation is going to say some stuff that's really different than what the RSV says. Some of them I'm actually going to like, and I'm going to read them to you. But the Hebrew starts to get really obscure in this last part. But no worries. Then Eliphaz, the Temanite, answered, "Can a man be profitable to God? Surely, he who is wise is profitable to himself. Is it any pleasure to the Almighty if you are righteous, or is it gain to him if you make your ways blameless?" This is an interesting question. And Eliphaz, I think, is actually hitting on a truth. Even Gregory the Great. This is why Gregory the Great likens them to heretics, because then he can do both ways. He can show how they say things that are true. But you don't ever hurt God by your misdeeds. You can't hurt God. Has anybody ever actually pondered Christ saying, it's better to give than to receive? You ever wonder why? It's better to give to receive. Absolutely. Let me ask you this. The giver of something possesses what the other person doesn't have. Huh? Does that make sense? Because they can't receive. If they already have it, then they can't receive it. It's better to give than to receive, because to receive means that it's you that lacks something, whereas the giver has something more excellent, which he can give. Okay? Now, God, who's the giver of all goods, lacks no good. That's why he's perfect. It's better to give than to receive, because if you receive, you're actually less than the giver. God's already perfectly happy. The fact that you need to be made happy, okay, and you get to be sad, has no bearing. That actually proves your inferiority to God. So you can't actually hurt God, because he already possesses perfect happiness. Nothing you do actually disturbs God. He's perfectly content in himself. He's given to you. And it's up to you whether or not you want to squander it or use it to your benefit. Okay? But it's better to give than to receive, because when you give, you're actually showing a truth that you have something that somebody else doesn't have. Think about that. It's part of Christian charity a little bit. If you give money to a poor person, they don't have it. And you're showing your excellency that you do, and you're willing to give it. Okay? All good things that you have come from God. And nothing you do actually can take away the good things he already possesses. Okay? Perfectly. So this is actually a true point. Is it for your fear of him that he reproves you and enters into judgment with you? ? he gives these hypotheticals. I think they're all supposed to be yes. Okay? Is it for your fear of him that he reproves you and enters into judgment with you? Is not your wickedness great? There is no end to your iniquities. For you have exacted pledges of your brothers for nothing. Now this is where Eliphaz is going to start to invent his indictment of Job. And he's going to accuse Job of, it's a complete fiction. At least as far as our story goes, this doesn't make any sense as far as Job's behavior. So he basically gives this introduction on, like, I don't know, you want to call it like the quality of God. And then he's going to give this, like, quality of Job. You have exacted pledges of your brothers for nothing and stripped the naked of their clothing. So here's a stripped image, which must be, it's kind of ironic because Job's sitting there naked, covered in sores. And Eliphaz is accusing him of stripping away their clothing. You have given no water to the weary to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. The man with power possessed the land, and the favored man dwelt in it. You have sent widows away empty, and the arms of the fatherless were crushed. So widows and orphans, those are the two most vulnerable people of the Old Testament. Widows and orphans. So basically, he's not just a bad guy who's like taking stuff away for greed. He's actually even taking from the people who have nothing, okay? The widows who lack a husband, and the children who lack parents. Therefore, snares are round about you, and sudden terror overwhelms you. The snares round about him. Maybe Eliphaz is commenting on Job, how he talks about his way is hedged in, like Job sees traps everywhere around. And Eliphaz is attributing the fact that Job doesn't know where to step because he can't see his path to, as a divine punishment because of these bad things he's done to the people. Your light is darkened so that you cannot see, and a flood of water covers you. Okay, very often I have told you in past lectures how like water is a symbol of death, and it's definitely being played on here. This flood of waters. This is actually echoing probably Genesis chapter 7. We've had a lot of Genesis chapters 1 and 2, but this is like Noah and the flood story. The flood, and what does the flood destroy? It destroys the iniquity of man. Is not God high in the heavens? See how lofty. See the highest stars, how lofty they are. I've actually just thought about this when I was preparing for this class. Very often we've been playing around with these concepts of light and darkness, and it's a common theme that courses through this whole poetical structure in the middle of this book. Somebody had the idea. Where's that person? Someone had an idea of like actually looking up to see how they transition. If you took them all out, I actually started to do that, and I started getting confused because I don't. But I actually got an idea though. So far, we haven't tried to. I don't know how you've been imagining it, but what time of day are these people arguing in? How many days have actually passed? Do they finish a bout and then they sit there and then the sun sets and then, because Job's talking about how his life is darkness and then finally the light goes away and all of a sudden the stars go out and Eliphaz is now talking about looking at the stars? There might be environmental time notes in these. I never thought about that before until you gave me the idea. So anyway, I kind of want to go back and reread it to see if I can track where days might have been or where long periods of pause might be, dramatic silences, as they stare at each other and Job's like scratching his sores. Yeah, okay. Therefore you say, what does God know? Can he judge through the deep darkness? So this is playing on the idea that, and this is something Job's actually going to pick up in later on, and he's going to reuse it. But basically, God can't see through that dark sky. Eliphaz is saying, hey, look at the stars. There's still light in the dark sky. It's not like it's so obscure you can't see. God can see through the night sky too. Can he judge the deep darkness? Thick clouds enwrap him so that he does not see, and he walks on the vault of heaven. He's given this image of God walking up there and he can't see through the darkness because this is not the case. Will you keep to the old way, which wicked men have trod? They were snatched away before their time. Their foundation was washed away. They said to God, "Depart from us. And what can the Almighty do to us?" Washed away. He's still playing on the flood image there, I think. He filled their houses with good things, but the counsel of the wicked is far from me. This is what the wicked people would say. The righteous see it and are glad. The innocent laugh them to scorn, saying, "Surely our adversaries are cut off, and what they left the fire has consumed." Okay, so in the end, the righteous people are victorious. Now, surprisingly, Eliphaz, after this strong indictment, especially in light of like this, okay, he actually now beseeches Job to like contrition, actually like he does care about Job's well-being. So he like petitions Job for repentance, starting at verse 21. Repentance. It's pretty good that the RSV puts actually a space here because it shows it does change theme here. Agree with God and be at peace. Thereby good will come to you. Receive instruction from his mouth and lay up his words in your heart. If you return to the Almighty and humble yourself, if you remove unrighteousness far from your tent, if you lay gold in the dust, you're going to want to like get these golds here. Gold in the dust and gold of Ophir among the stones of the torrent bed. And if the Almighty is your gold, and your precious silver, then you will delight yourself in the Almighty and lift up your face to God. First of all, this is a kenning, gold and gold of Ophir. No one actually knows where Ophir is. There's lots of different people who give different, it's all speculation. Some people say India, some people say like Central Africa, some people say Zimbabwe. And Kings and Chronicles actually recounts how Solomon goes and gets gold from Ophir. And actually, archaeologically, they have discovered in northern Israel actually gold coins stamped with the name Ophir, but nobody knows where they came from. But so Ophir is like really, really like great gold. Like the reason why I call this kenning is because it's like a point of emphasis. Is like it's not just gold, but gold from Ophir. Okay, it's doing a duplication in order to emphasize a point. Ophir, I guess, might actually start functioning as like almost a metonym for beautiful gold itself. This is actually also a very nice play. Eliphaz's name means God is my fine gold. Okay, and this is Eliphaz's last final speech. And so Eliphaz, which means God is my fine gold. Like you should probably like write a little note on that or something. Is now actually telling Job to make God your gold, huh? To get rid of, don't worry about all the gold of earth, but like make God your gold, okay? So he's playing on his name. You will make your prayer to him, and he will hear you, and you will pay your vows. You will decide on a matter, and it will be established for you. And light will shine on your ways. For God abases the proud, but he saves the lowly. He delivers the innocent man. You will be delivered to the cleanness of your hands. Okay, so beseech God, repent, and he will deliver you. This is also quite ironic. You will make your prayer for him, and he will hear you. In the epilogue, Job is actually going to have to pray for Eliphaz, and God hears Job's prayer. Okay? Job actually functions as a mediator for the three friends who have all spoken wrongly. So here Eliphaz is making almost like a Caiaphas prophecy. Yes, God is going to hear his prayer, not to save Job's soul, but to save Eliphaz's soul. Okay? It's like a little irony. Then Job answered, "Today also my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy in spite of my groaning." Okay, he's talking about God here, okay? His hand is heavy in spite of my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I could find him, that I may come even to his seat. I would lay my case before him. So here Job keeps actually coming back to this. He first did it hypothetically, his court case. Then he said, I will take God to court. God doesn't engage him, though. It's just silence. And now he's still like pleading for this court case again. But he needs to know where he has to actually go in order to do it. Now he's talking about, I want to go up to God so I can appear before that tribunal. I would lay my case before him. I'd fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn that what he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Would he contend with me in the greatness of his power? No. He would give heed to me. There an upright man could reason with him, and I should be acquitted forever by my judge. He doesn't reference, but in his previous hypothetical court cases, he's also made reference to this umpire and mediator and redeemer. And it does seem to be that's a different person than God, who seems to have been punishing him. And so, though he doesn't directly reference it here as far as how he's going to get acquitted before his judge, I think that the advocate and the redeemer is present in this hypothetical court case, at least implicitly in the back of his mind. Behold, I go forward, but he is not here. The word for forward here is actually east. Okay? This is east. And backwards, so that's to the west. But I cannot perceive him. On the left hand, I seek him. Left hand, the word there is actually north. It's for north. But I cannot behold him. I turn to the right, but I cannot see him. So this is south. Okay, so he goes through the four quadrants of the compass. He's in a void, chaos, wasteland. Where is he at? I don't know. I can't see him. This is a big problem for Job because he wants to be able to take his court case to him. But he can't see God anywhere. How am I going to plead my case? I look around, don't see anything. Though Job doesn't know where to go, and though Job can't see the way to God, he knows the way that I take. When he has tried me, I shall come forth as gold. Okay, so Job's the gold here. So he takes that gold from Eliphaz and he goes, yes, okay, God is like my gold, the precious thing that you want to grab onto, but gold is refined as fire. And this is a classic wisdom image, too. And the saints themselves have to be refined as fire. He goes, hey, I'm being refined, and I'm going to come forth as gold. My foot has held fast to his steps. This is why he's gold. He hasn't broken faith. I've kept his way and have not turned aside. That's an interesting paradox. He doesn't know where to walk, but he's walked straight as far as the law of God is concerned. Okay? He's a lost pilgrim who's walking straight. Eh? Oh, I like that. Not all who wander are lost. Have you ever heard that quote? Where are you at? Yeah. Okay. It's Tolkien, if anybody doesn't know that. I have not departed from the commandments of his lips. I've treasured in my bosom the words of his mouth. But he is unchangeable, and who can turn him? This is agreeing actually with how you can't affect anything on God. He's unchangeable. He's agreeing with Eliphaz's previous statement. I should actually write that in there. 22:3. What he desires that he does, for he will complete what he has appointed for me. And many such things are in his mind. And Job has reference to this, like man has an appointed set of days. And he's asked for his appointed set of days to be made shorter. Okay? Let them end, and they don't ever end. And then he also made reference to the appointed time in the dead. He referenced that in the last cycle too. Man has a set of appointed days, not only on earth, but also in the grave. Now this is Old Testament, so we can see this as a shadowy foreshadowing of actually the limbo of the fathers and the appointed time in the fullness of time how Christ comes, okay? To release those that are sitting in the grave. But anyway, so these are these appointed times. Job's waiting for it. Now, this terrifies him because he actually doesn't know when that appointed time is. Therefore, I am terrified at his presence. When I consider, I'm in dread of him. God has made my heart faint. The Almighty has terrified me. For I am hemmed in by darkness, and thick darkness covers my face. This is a very confusing line. This last line, the Hebrew is obscure, and it's translated differently in different translations. I'm going to give you the Douay-Rheims. Actually, kind of makes more sense in this case. The Douay-Rheims reads, which is Jerome's Vulgate, "For I have not perished because of the darkness that hangs over me, neither has the mist covered my face." So according to Jerome's reading of this obscure Hebrew, the reason why he's terrified is because he hasn't died, and his appointed time's not coming. That makes more sense than what this reads, I think. Okay? Any questions on that? Look it up in the Douay-Rheims if you want to, like, put a question mark there and say, like, DR. Okay? But before I do chapter 24, I'm going to, like, this is good just I'm going to give you my own take on this, but when we get into 24, 25, 26, 27 is where we're going to start seeing a lot of debate on things by modern translators. And we're going to find stuff. I remember when I read through it, I was like, is Job actually saying this? This does not sound like Job. Because right now you've studied enough and you've been like kind of following the themes and the way that people talk. To hear Job talk like one of his three friends doesn't make much sense. It like strikes you. Well, here in chapter 24, people start seeing some problems. This is by James Crenshaw. He says this: chapter 24 poses even greater problems for understanding Job's thinking. The views expressed there appear at times to be at odds with the themes that have run through his comments thus far. That sudden change in perspective, the truncated nature of Bildad's next speech. Go ahead and look at what Bildad's next speech looks like. It's 6 verses. Okay? All of a sudden, Bildad has like this little shortest speech. It's like 6 verses. The truncated nature of Bildad's next speech and the missing response of Zophar. Yeah, Zophar goes away. Where's Zophar? Don't know. Have led interpreters to attribute portions, if not all, of the chapter to one or both of them. So far, no manuscript supports a reallocation of text, and every rearrangement of the material is speculative, even if deriving from a valid intuition. To some extent, all interpretation of ancient texts depends on disciplined imagination, so such an effort to clarify the chapter is not wrong in principle. Okay, so I wanted to show you this because people who actually have made it their life to translate the book of Job, they end up coming into problems and they start actually thinking, like, did the scrolls get jumbled up, or did an editor accidentally like mess up the dialogues? Here's another translator, and this is Robert Alter. Robert Alter wrote a couple of really important books. They're on my short list that I tell seminarians to read. They're at the library at our seminary. But he wrote a book called The Art of Biblical Narrative and The Art of Biblical Poetry. And they were both very beautiful books. But this is what he says when it comes to chapter 24. Specifically, verses 18 to 24. The passage that runs from here, verse 18 to the end, is one of the most notoriously obscure in the book of Job. Some scholars think it belongs in its entirety either to chapter 25, where a sizable section of Bildad's speech has obviously been lost, or to chapter 26. Such radical transporting of chunks of text is based on risky conjecture. And so it seems best to leave the passage where it is, construing the verbs as curse forms. Their form in Hebrew gives no clear indication of their mode. May all these dire things befall the wicked. Okay, and he starts doing his translation. Okay, so these are two translators, and they both are acknowledging. In chapter 24, we get kind of like obscure things that don't make much sense. And a lot of people start trying to say, hey, maybe this is Bildad. Or maybe this is like Zophar's lost monologue of Zophar. There's no evidence, though. There's no texts that anybody can point to where it exists in that way. This is what we call the received form. As far as I know, the church hasn't actually made any kind of official position on this, because the Pontifical Biblical Commission seemed, when it was still in effect, it seemed to become focused on like the New Testament and the book of Genesis. That's where a lot of the questions were being arose from textual criticism. But I wanted to just show you that how people start debating when they start seeing differences of themes manifest themselves. Like they kind of look and they go, they wonder, was something displaced or moved? Because when you write, I mean, the Bible, we tend to think like Protestants a little bit. Like the Bible didn't fall from the sky into like people's laps. We're like, oh, great. Like we have like the perfect manuscript. Like that doesn't exist. Find that Bible. I really would like it. Okay? But the Bible is a product of tradition. Remember, tradition, capital T, is actually two things. Spoken and written. Okay? And spoken comes before written. Job existed in speech for a very long time, and then it gets written down. And then it gets written down by getting copied. And it gets handed on. And nobody knows the hand that wrote the original. Okay? So let's pay attention to when like things kind of like, is this Job? I think we're supposed to, I think whoever like received it, they received it as Job. So we like, even if it did originally belong somewhere else, like I really don't care. This is the received text, and I'm not going to like start butchering it because I think that's more dangerous. So you always just treat it as it is. But remember, like you're dealing with a product that's come through millennia. It's amazing like how much of it is actually the same when you get multiple manuscripts. I don't think people understand. Like it's pretty amazing how much of it actually persists. Why are not times of judgment kept by the Almighty, and why do those who know him never see his days? Men remove landmarks. They seize flocks and pasture them. Okay, so these are people who actually steal property, move landmarks. They take the property of others, pasture them. He's talking about the bad guys. Eliphaz accused him of being a bad guy. Job is going to now invoke all the bad people who never get punished. They drive away the donkey of the fatherless. They take the widow's ox for a pledge. They thrust the poor off the road. Poor of the earth all hide themselves. Behold, like wild donkeys in the desert, they go forth to their toil. The poor who have no material sustenance have to live like wild beasts out in the wilderness, foraging on like sagebrush. Okay, they don't have any property. It's a terrible image of like poverty, huh? Seeking prey in the wilderness as food for their children. They gather their father in the field, and they glean the vineyard of the wicked man. So they get enslaved to the man of poverty, but they don't get to partake in any of the fruits of their labor. Okay, they work his fields. They don't take any of the crops, though. Okay. They lie all night naked without clothing and have no covering in the cold. They are wet with the rain of the mountains and cling to the rock for want of shelter. Abject, alone, with nothing. Here we have the misery of the water, huh? Clinging on them through the night as they clutch their mountains. There are those who snatch the fatherless child from the breast and take and pledge the infant of the poor. Okay? They bribe people with their own children. They go about naked without clothing. Hungry, they carry their sheaves. Among the olive rows of the wicked, they make oil. So this is actually kind of a parallel, huh? Hungry, carrying their sheaves. These are both agricultural images of them working for the rich man. And that was up here. And you have this go about naked. They're here all night naked. I guess you have the snatching the fatherless child from the breast. Okay. That's actually taking the widow's son. That's what that is. So the widow's there too, the fatherless child. They tread the wine presses but suffer thirst. From out of the city the dying groan. The soul of the wounded cries for help. Yet God pays no attention to their prayer. Okay, so remember Abel was slain and his blood cried to God. And Job actually referenced that a little bit. He says, let the earth cry out to me when I die. A witness for me. Here in this image, he actually has all the people who suffer from the hands of the wicked. And they cry during the night. And God does not hear their prayer because the injustice is still done. That's the picture he paints. There are those who rebel against the light, who are not acquainted with their ways. Now here Job is going to completely do some metaphorical ninjutsu, I think. Because he's been talking about how night is this great thing because it's going to stop his misery because it's death. Okay? But he's also talking about how night is like terrible because it's a lack of knowledge. Now, because he doesn't know where to go. His ways are dark. He's also described himself as turning into darkness. He has darkness under his eyes. The members are turning dark. Maybe it's from his bruising. So he himself is starting to embody darkness. Now he's going to start using this different aspect of dark, which has to do with knowledge too, but it's going to have to do with divine knowledge. And I used this citation actually on Holy Thursday. So there are those who rebel against the light, who are not acquainted with its ways. So the light here is going to be like God's law. The murderer rises in the dark, that he may kill the poor and needy, and in the night he is a thief. Okay, so this is talking. Actually, this is a problem right here. What does the Dewey Ream say for 14? Do you know?
You know what? I just have the RSV.
Oh, you didn't bring it. Okay.
I got it.
What does the RSV say for 14?
Murder rises at the very break of day.
Break a day. There you go. That's what I wanted. Break a day. Okay, so the word here is actually light. And I don't know why the RSV translates it as night. They do it. It doesn't make much sense. Well, it kind of makes sense because they're trying to make a continuity with, I guess, the rebels rebelling against the light. So then why would he be waking up during the daytime? Especially following this, we're going to see all the nocturnal activity. But this is it's a opposite parallel. The murderer rises at night, and at night he is a thief. So his evilness is actually all day long. So the word here is or, which is the Hebrew word for light. And people who try to argue that it might be an idiom for darkness in some situations, I think it's kind of forced and it doesn't really work well. So the murderer rises in the light that he may kill the poor and the needy. So he basically has no regard for divine justice. And in the night he is as a thief. The eye of the adulterer also waits for the twilight. And so here we're going to have, I was supposed to use gray here. And so now it's going to the twilight. Saying, no eye will see me, because in darkness, lack of knowledge, people can't see me. And he disguises his face. In the dark they dig through houses. And in day they shut themselves up. They do not know the light. Okay, I think this is kind of neat, probably here. So in the dark they dig through houses. They're like burglars. They go into the house, it's darkness. They don't have flashlights here, okay? So they're like fumbling around for like riches. But then look, it gives you this weird line in 16 because it wants to do its parallelism of opposites. By day they shut themselves up. They do not know the light. Is the image actually a continuation of the burglars? Because if you go into a house and you want to burgle it during the day, what do? You like start closing all the windows so nobody sees you shuffling around inside? Shutting the curtains as you go through the guy's chests. Okay, I don't know what these $20 would have, but you would like close the opening. But the point is that even during the day, they're making themselves be at night because they work at night. Yeah, that's pretty beautiful poetics there. For deep darkness is morning to all of them. Okay, so they make their light darkness, and they work at darkness. All their crime is darkness. Deep darkness is morning to all of them, for they are friends with the terrors of the deep darkness. Okay, so this is like a very negative image of darkness, which Job has always been talking about darkness in a good way. So this is like a kind of a reversal or a reapplication of his own metaphor towards like negative things. You say they are swiftly carried away upon the face of the waters. Their portion is cursed in the land. No treader turns towards their vineyards. Drought and heat snatch away the snow waters. Face of the waters. He gets really aquatic here. Drought and heat snatch away the snow waters. This snow waters image, this kind of also shows you the condensing of poetry. It's kind of telescopic in a certain way. So in this image of snow waters and heat snatching away, you have like snow that melts into water, which you can drink, but then it evaporates in the heat. Okay? So it gets all that action and just like heat snatches away snow waters. You gotta have to like read the image there. So does hell those who have sinned. Okay? Life waters evaporate away. Like, that's how quickly they'll go away. The squares of the town forget them. Okay, this makes no sense. This is one of those lines that doesn't translate very well. The squares of the town forget them. Their name is no longer remembered. Okay, this line right here, I'm going to like not use this translation because it doesn't. The Hebrew is really obscure, but Jerome's Vulgate will read. Well, Jerome's Vulgate will read, "Let mercy forget him, may worms be his sweetness." The Hebrew, what most people consider the Hebrew to read is, "The womb forgets them, the worm finds them sweet." Now, that's a lot different than squares of town forget them, and their name is no longer remembered. Okay, this just shows you like translations are kind of like, whoa. Gregory the Great has this great like 2 paragraphs on Jerome's line. Let mercy forget him. That just shows you the fathers will be they're forced to use a certain translation, and so he writes for a whole page on how is it that God's mercy forgets the sinner, because that sounds very counter like what we normally notice, huh? The very loving God. And Gregory the Great makes this great point about how, in truth, God's mercy forgets him who forgets God's justice. That's what we call the sin of final impenitence. You have to ask for forgiveness, which means you have to acknowledge out of justice you did something wrong in order to receive mercy. Okay? It's a really beautiful interpretation of let mercy forget him. Huh? It is, right? So remember that. Mercy forgets him who forgets justice. Gregory the Great. On a line that doesn't exist in most Bibles. Okay? Doesn't mean he's wrong. Doesn't. I'm going to go with the common Hebrew here. The womb forgets them, the worm finds them sweet, because it has the worm to tomb thing there. And we're going to get back into these worms. They're going to remember Job said he's clothed in worms. He called worms a sister, and so like worms are like a really gross image. Okay. So wickedness is broken like a tree. They've really obliterated our tree of hope from like a couple monologues back. They uprooted that thing. They scorched its sprouts, its fruit. It got pulled up like no hope, and now it's like even the wickedness are like a broken tree that gets zapped by lightning. Job's little like natural allegory for resurrection of the dead has been completely obliterated. They nuked it, and now he's still using them. Broken like a tree. They feed on the barren, childless woman and do no good to the widow. Yet God prolongs the life of the mighty by his power. They rise up when they despair of life. He gives them security, and they are supported, and his eyes are upon their ways. They are exalted a little while, and then are gone. They wither and fade like the mallow. I think mallow is like a type of weed. They are cut off like the heads of grain. If it is not so, who will prove me a liar and show that there is nothing in what I say? So they are talking about this whole liar thing. This is a new thing for the third cycle. They've come into outright calling each other liars in this one. Okay. I'm going to do Bildad because it's 6 verses. Then Bildad, the Suhite, answered, "Dominion and fear are with God. He makes peace in his high heavens. Is there any number to his armies? Upon whom does his light not arise?" Is this dawn now? Did they walk through the night and now it's like dawn? I don't know. I got to think about that more. How then can man be righteous before God? How can he who is born of a woman be clean? Maybe it's like funny that there's only 6 verses for Bildad because he doesn't actually say anything new. And he just actually cites Eliphaz twice, really. And that's 4:17, 19. And then Eliphaz repeats his whole thing about how man can't be clean in God's sight in chapter 15, 14, 16. How can he who is born of the woman be clean? Behold, even the moon is not bright, and the stars are not clean in his sight. Okay, this not bright, the moon is not bright, and the stars are not clean in his sight. So he's talking about these like bright objects, right, at night. And he says these things, even though they're bright, like they're not even clean when you compare them to God. This is actually a pun too, because the word here in Hebrew is it's zaku, which can also stand for pure and innocent. Okay, so bright, pure, and innocent. Even the moon is not pure. innocent. It's guilty. And that's what he's kind of talking about. Okay? Pun. For. Pure. How much less a man who is a maggot? The son of man who is a worm. Okay, they don't. That's a pretty hard image of what mankind is. But that's also, I think, if he's talking to Job, he's really like, he's using Job's words against him, because Job has said, like, he's clothed with maggots. That's chapter 7, verse 4. And then he said he calls the worm his sister. That was in 17:14. Okay? I'm going to finish it out. Then Job answered, how you have helped him who has no power. How you have saved the arm of him who has no strength. This is sarcasm. Okay? Job has no power, he has no strength. He goes, wow, how much have you helped me? And that's been a big theme for Job, is actually the lack of aid that he gets from friends. And which makes me think, you have heard of the patience of Job. Like, that's like, hey, the letter of James. We always think of the suffering of Job, but that encapsulates patience. I want you to think, this just came to me the other day. How much are the friends an illustration of a lack of patience? Because the friends are not patient with Job at all. Okay? And look at how they behave with regards to Job himself. They're not patient with Job's suffering. They're like trying to do everything in their power to get rid of it in all the wrong ways. Instead of just patiently suffer, while Job patiently suffers and how he has to suffer. But the friends lack patience. It's something we don't actually think about. How you have consoled him who has no knowledge. I think this is Job being sarcastic still, because I think he really thinks he has insight and he has wisdom. And plentifully declared sound knowledge. With whose help have you uttered words, and whose spirit has come forth from you? The spirit is actually, I think it's evoking kind of the image of God's spirit, which speaks revelatory, like how he does it through the prophets. What spirit is this that you're speaking with? This isn't from God. The shades below tremble. The Greek and the Latin here say giants. The Hebrew says shades. I don't know. The shades below tremble. The waters and their inhabitants. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. What is Abaddon? That's a pretty cosmic word right there. Abaddon is actually used 6 times in the Hebrew Bible. It's used in 3 of them are in Job. This one, 26:6. It's used in 28:22. It's used in 31:12. It's also used in Psalm 88, verse 11. It's used in Proverbs 15:11. And Proverbs chapter 27, verse 20. Okay? Abaddon. It's an intense form of the Hebrew word for destruction, and is normally referred to as a place of destruction. It's used the 7th time in the Bible in the book of Apocalypse. Okay, and it's the only time in the Hebrew in the Bible where it's used as a personal name. Okay, for the demon, and that's Revelation chapter 9, verse 11. But it's used 3 times in Job, which I find interesting because Book of the Apocalypse uses the Leviathan too, with the 7-headed beast that comes out of the water. So maybe John liked a lot of Job when describing the ends of the world. But he stretches out the north over the void. North, you got to make a mark on this one too, because the word here for north, the RSV translators are using this as a metonym. It's Sophone. Some more, like the new RSV will actually use it as a proper name, Zophone. Zophone is actually the name of the most northern mountain. It's actually in Syria. I forgot what its contemporary name is. But if you Google that, you'll get like a whole article on it. It's like this high mountain that's right on the coast of the Mediterranean that storm clouds actually gather over. There was a temple on it going all the way back to the Ugaritic times, a temple to Baal, okay, the storm god. The Greeks made it a temple to Zeus. And even the Romans used it also as a temple. Julian the Apostate actually climbed up there and made a vow to Jupiter. Okay? Zophon. But it's as far north place. So it became a metonym for the extreme north. These translators make it to be the direction, but it's probably Zophon, because Zophon it's the place where Baal dwelt, and also Marduk. And according to Canaanite mythology and Ugaritic mythology, Marduk and Baal battle the sea, okay, and the sea serpent, and they make order out of chaos. And we're going to find, actually, in Job's conclusion here, we're going to get a lot of our mythological language, and it's going to show up here pretty soon. So I think this is actually introducing it. He stretches out Zophon over the void, okay, and hangs the earth upon nothing. He binds the waters in his thick clouds, and the cloud is not torn under them. So there's a big storm cloud, filling up with water, but the cloud stays tight. Okay, he covers the face of the moon and spreads over it his cloud. Okay, this cloud is cosmic cloud, covers all the sky. He has described a circle upon the face of the waters. Hey, he gave boundaries to the chaotic waters which cannot pass. At the boundary between light and darkness, yes, where the dawn and dusk, where they hit, those boundaries of the waters. The pillars of the earth tremble. Those are the pillars that go way down into the abyss, that keeps us floating on top of the Death Sea. Okay, according to their cosmology, the world isn't like a little snow globe. Okay, it sits on top of water, but there's the pillars of the earth. These things that go way down. They tremble and are astounded at his rebuke. By his power, he stilled the sea. You see, this is the image when I think of Christ storming the sea, stilling the storm at sea in the boat. Like it's this kind of like divine activity that I think is supposed to be in your mind. Like going all the way back to that ancient idea of like God battling the sea. And the sea is a symbol of the Antichrist, the anti-God, the anti-order. But it's a Canaanite myth, and Job is using it here. By his power, he stilled the sea. Somebody stop that kid. By his understanding, he struck Rahab. By his wind, the heavens were made fair. You see the winds. It's the winds that cut. When Marduk battles Timian, it's winds that actually divide the waters into two and make the sky and the earth. Thank you. Did you come back? No. By his wind, the heavens were made fair. His hand pierced the fleeing serpent. Okay, so here's the serpent image again. Behold, these are but the outskirts of his ways, and how small a whisper do we hear of them. But the thunder of his power, who can understand? Okay, these are just the whisperings of his power. This idea of what he did at the creative moment, at the beginning of creation. And he's using this mythic image of it. So this is how Job ends his monologues. Now, the next section is going to be what I call the conclusion. Okay? And some people will debate on whether parts of these are actually Zophar and or belong to Bildad too. But because Job's conclusion is two parts. And I'll cover these when we come back. Next Thursday. Right? Next Thursday? Next Thursday. Let us stand. In the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Benedictio Deum Tentis and Patris et Filii Spiritus Sanctus et Super Vos et Manis Semper. Amen. Gosh.